Who do you think will most benefit from this book?
Well, my hope is that it would really reach a lot of people who are struggling with self-sabotaging behaviors, either in the workplace or in their relationships or at midlife. I think people who are in midlife will find our chapter on that to be a very unusual perspective. It's a very common time in which we face our shadow issues. And
they really can explode.
They really can explode. They can result in the rising divorce rate that we have, all of the consequences that that means for our children. They can result in people leaving careers that they've established because, you know, we are taught that we have to change it on the outside. And in fact, our perspective is if we have the tools, we can work with these issues on the inside and not have to make such dramatic breaks in our lives.
If you had somebody come into your office that was telling you about a specific problem, how would you begin the process?
Well, we would begin, as any therapist would, to listen to their story, but we would then tell them a story in return.
And would this story have any mythology?
It might be a myth, and we use mythologies from different cultures, stories from all over the world. It might be in an effort to help them get a different perspective on what's going on. They can find their own story that they are living in their lives. But we would also teach them the practice of self-observation so that they can slow down when the shadow character shows up. And we would teach them how to detect these cues, these signals that that hidden part of ourself is showing up. And then we would trace that character back into our family patterns so that, as you said earlier, they could have the insight about where it comes from. If they're interested in mythology, they can find the mythological roots of that shadow character. And then we would help them to work with these tools in an ongoing way so that they can romance their own dark sides and turn it into light.
This is an absolutely interesting process, and it's really, as you said earlier, it's just a little bit different way of looking at something that people in the therapeutic community have spoken about or done a long time ago, for a long time. The book is Romancing the Shadow, Illuminating the Dark Side of the Soul. And as I said before, it's really written for lay people. One of the things that I found very interesting was the use of mythology, because much of what does go on in our lives can be traced back. Is this something that, well, of course, if you are a follower of Jung, you're going to be interested in the mythology also. I thought it enhanced the book, though. Was that something, and I wondered if that was something that you had toyed with putting in or not, but the fact that, because you follow Jung.
Yes, my orientation is really and my training is steeped in Greek mythology. And Steve's orientation is very much as a storyteller. He uses stories in his private practice. So we were quite aligned on that. And here's the reason. There have been legends in every culture about the shadow. The hero who goes down into the cave and slays the beast. The monster that has to be, the demons that have to be met along the path. It's a universal character in cultures all over the world. And what we're saying is that each of us is living a universal story. We may feel quite alone. We may feel as if our individual stories are unique. And yet, you know, you may be familiar with Joseph Campbell and his teachings about mythology. There are only so many stories being lived. And so if you can find that particular story that you are living,
you can study it.
You will feel more connected to the rest of humanity. You will feel less isolated. And if that story isn't working for you, you might want to change it. So in the book, I actually open the book with a lengthy piece about my own story and how I discovered the myth that I was living and what that came to mean for me, and when it wasn't working anymore.
And we're just about out of time. Real briefly, in about 30 seconds, can you tell me what was the most surprising thing for you in doing shadow work?
The most surprising thing for me is how helpful it can be. How quickly people can begin to take what looks like a very unspecific, difficult, random behavior and actually find pattern and meaning in it and make sense of the difficult feelings in our lives.
Well, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating subject. I thank you so much, Dr. Zweig, for being here today. The book is Romancing the Shadow, Illuminating the Dark Side of the Soul. It's something that I think that everybody sitting at home, especially with the winter in Minnesota coming up, can take advantage of and learn something about themselves and perhaps make some changes in their life.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.